Hello there, C-Note here, and welcome to Dopamine, the show that is all about personal empowerment and creative acceptance. Actually, flip that, personal acceptance and creative empowerment. One or the other. Still working on the taglines and all that fun stuff. Today I'm, first of all, trying a slightly different setup. Headphones in the bedroom, Molly's in the living room watching TV, and so I'm trying to see if this will work while she's in there and I'm in here, because we have a small apartment, like 400 square feet, and trying to see if this is even possible to begin with so that I can make more things on the fly and when I'm inspired to do them, right? I think that's one of the perceiver creative challenges, is being able to tap into the energy that we have when we have that energy. Otherwise, it just kind of fizzles and dissipates and we don't make the best use of it, right? And so this video is actually about INTP growing pains, and I probably could start with that. One of those first growing pains is being the difficulty with harnessing creative energy or harnessing motivation or harnessing an excitement about something. And I think as an INTP, I know all about these growing pains because it very much pervades the mind of the INTP, in the sense that trying to, when you're growing up, a lot of your mental real estate is just, your life is spent in your head. Your sense of reality is more internal versus external. That's one way you can define introvert versus extrovert, is internal sense of reality versus external sense of reality, right? And so if you're growing up with a more internal sense of reality, then even the things that you create are going to be for your internal world. But as you grow up, as you start to interface with the external world, you find that your internal world is not the only reality that exists, and you have to find ways to bring those desires, those thoughts, those complexes, those all sorts of different modes into your external world somehow, some way. Right. And so I want to acknowledge that sort of growing pain as an INTP, because it is tough. And that's why I make videos and create courses and talk about all this stuff, because I'm very, 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 very aware and familiar of those growing pains. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring up this topic in general is because I just got done profiler training with my friends at Personality Hacker, and I got a chance to meet some new INTPs that I haven't met before and learn some more of their growing pains and difficulties. And so while I kind of jumped on the productivity train, this was actually more about developing some of that extroverted intuition and the challenge that comes with that. And the challenge that comes with that is sometimes we sort of pendulum swing to one side or the other when it comes to the paradox of thinking that we need to stay in our introverted sensing and maybe not fully trusting that extroverted intuition yet. And how that tends to manifest is maybe a super quiet type of person, type of INTP who is afraid to share their thoughts or share to expand on their experiences, or someone who is maybe overdoing it. I definitely fell into the category of overdoing it. I took on every possibility I feel out there, not every, but a lot of possibilities out there, and really put myself out there in a way that was a lot. I went real big, real hard, and so that was a challenge for me to go through that version of the growing pains of not necessarily being losing my grounding altogether that comes with introverted sensing traditions and rituals and staying in a kind of focused routine. And then there's the part of it about, like, all of it is kind of leaning towards the introverted thinking angle of it. So as INTPs, our dominant function is introverted thinking, which is typically about creating distinctions and trying to figure out the core principle, which ends up happening to be a truth of some kind. Usually it's our truth, something that we've figured out about ourselves or our world around us, or how something works based on some of the patterns that we've seen. And it can be very hard growing up as an INTP, to have those distinctions and connection points with someone, or to be able to share those distinctions, because it's always assumed that those distinctions are causing rifts in people. And so one of the challenges really is that as an INTP, the introverted thinking process is a process that needs refinement over time. And because we understand a thought, it's very easy for us to buy into a thought, right? If it makes sense to us, regardless of whether the idea of sense has any sophistication or not, if something makes sense to us, then that's the thing, right? But the exposure to external reality over time through our extroverted intuition and extroverted feeling tends to show otherwise. Sometimes those things are not true. Sometimes they are not easily palatable to more people. Sometimes they are not made approachable when we start to finally interface with people, when we start to want things from other people, wanting companionship, wanting connection, wanting a job. And because those are very much parts of the human experience, right? And you may have learned early in life, like I learned when I was 17 that I'm an INTP. And learning that I was an INTP, I kind of bought into some of the memes and stereotypes of being an INTP, that I'm like a robot and I'm not going to have luck in love and all of that stuff. And that's just nonsense. You know, that's not true. But as an INTP growing up, you may have experienced or may be experiencing a lot of dissatisfaction or discouragement around feeling like you have any sort of connective tissue or possibility, right? Because that dominant introverted thinking feels like it's all about just distance. It's all about making disconnections, right? Or other people, everyone around you is ignoring principles or truths or logic, and you're the only one that cares, right? There's an instant separation between you and other people. And so I understand that feeling. I understand how that feels. But what's important, though, and something that is a bit of a core principle for me around understanding my introverted thinking, is that I don't want my thoughts to die with me. I feel like that's kind of a waste. Like, I'm going to go through this entire existence knowing that I will die someday, that I'm working through all sorts of thoughts and ideas, concepts, and it feels almost so self-indulgent to keep it within me. No, I don't mean start a crusade and start to change everyone's minds. That's not what I'm talking about. Well, what I'm saying is that it's sort of my job as an INTP to refine my thoughts to such a degree that it can be palatable to multiple people. And if you're using introverted thinking with that extroverted feeling polarity, that inferior function, which is all about harmony and connection and getting needs met, an INTP version of getting needs met is helping to, I got squeaky floors, helping to solve problems for people, or helping someone gain some sort of clarity, or solving a creative challenge. And that comes with refinement. And as an INTP, because we have our introverted thinking as our dominant function, there's less of a desire to seek feedback. There's more time being spent on the internal world. There's more time being spent on trying to figure things out for ourselves, trying to disseminate, trying to create distinctions on our own, where maybe we can understand what we're thinking or what we're saying, and maybe less so see the value in getting feedback. But in my mind and in my experience, getting feedback actually helps me refine my thoughts to a way that enables the ability for other thoughts to come through cleanly and then come out cleanly. And then sometimes I can get feedback from those thoughts in order to support my own thoughts, right? So in a way, learning to get feedback is a kind of a selfish endeavor. And I don't mean that negatively, but I mean, like, since we're already self-focused as an INTP, it sounds like extroverted feeling is about just sacrificing ourselves or our thinking or ignoring our thinking. But really, when you learn to provide disclaimers when you speak and say like, hey, I'm about to provide a truth. Hopefully you can tell me if this makes sense or not. And you do get some feedback from someone and they say like, oh, that does make sense. But there was one thing that kind of, it didn't make sense. It didn't quite make sense. I'm not sure I follow it, or it's not the way I really think. And I'm curious if there's another way that you can put it, right? And it's through that series of feedback that you learn how different brains work. You learn about the different perspectives. You learn about different thought processes. And through all of that, you can then refine all of yours. And through refining yours, you are able to streamline some more of your thinking process in a way that allows you to navigate thoughts a little bit more cleanly. I don't know if that's the right word, but over time, you're able to make more connections. You're able to share more thoughts, get more satisfaction from sharing those thoughts, not feel so alone by being able to share those thoughts, not having to purposefully seclude yourself or not having to create deflections or projections or other means of making yourself distant from people, essentially. And so what I do on this YouTube channel is I share some thoughts. I do to my best ability with whatever feedback I've gotten in the past. I try to adjust the way that I speak or how I speak about things or the way I articulate. There are probably multiple videos where I articulate things in multiple different ways because you're all different. Even though you may be an NTP and you're listening to this, you're going to have different experiences, different levels of development. Maybe you have more one-sided tendencies. Maybe you're a little bit more fully integrated. And I don't really know. And so I've gotten comments before where something is like, that was vague. I'm like, this has to be vague. I'm talking to you, and I don't necessarily know who you are. I don't know your specific circumstances or details. And sometimes filling in those details is what helps with growth. So when it comes to like growing pains, I understand that a major element of INTP growing pains can feel a sense of loneliness. Even if you don't even really feel it or realize it, there's a satisfaction that comes from using all of our cognitive functions, from using them at varying times, right? You can get satisfaction from using that extroverted feeling. You can get satisfaction from using that introverted sensing, extroverted intuition, and then introverted thinking. But if you're not getting the validation, like I talked about in the last video, or affirmations for your thinking, if it doesn't make sense, and you're not doing the work to continue to try to make it make sense to more people, or your thought process makes sense to more people, and you're just blasting things out there or hoping that it sticks or whatever, and not doing the refinement, then you're not going to get the feedback you need to feel satisfied in the exploration of the thoughts that you were doing in the first place, and then maybe not feel willing to go out and experience more things, and then maybe not be willing to relive some of those experiences because you maybe don't have a lot of happy experiences, and then maybe not feel like you want to bring your thoughts to other people because you've only gotten kickback and negative feedback, right? But what I think is important to know is that feedback is information. Emotions can very much just be information, and it's helpful to know how someone feels based on what you're saying, even if you're annoyed by it and saying like, oh, people keep throwing their bias into it. But wanting to be unbiased is also a bias. And so all of that can throw everything into a loop. And part of it is just like, if there's an acceptance of the fact that there's no perfect, clean, unbiased situation or unbiased way of expressing something, that you can practice being a little bit messier with your thoughts in an effort to get calibration from someone else. And I don't mean just without consent, just blasting your thoughts at someone and hoping they stick, but really feeling like you're connecting with someone by sharing something, by saying like, hey, I've got some thoughts on this. I'm kind of workshopping it. I'm not really entirely sure, but I think this is something that really it really might mean something. And so if you could hear me out, that would be really rad. And there are some brains who just have a really hard time tracking introverted thinking. And that's not their fault, and that's not your fault. It's not something to judge anyone on. There's just different brains do different things. It's just, at this point, if you've been studying personality types or have gotten to know cognitive functions, then you know that different brains are different. And so it can be frustrating to feel like you can't connect with different brains because you're trying to make someone think the way that you do. But part of that process of getting feedback is, again, eventually learning how other brains think, how other brains have different ways of making sense of things. And then you can start to tailor a little bit and adapt to the context, adapt to different modes of thinking. And that doesn't mean pandering. I know a lot of INTPs worry about pandering, like scared to just do what someone else tells you to do. It's not about that. It's not about giving up your individuality. It's not about giving up on your thought process. It's just finding another way to say it, finding another way to do it. Because if you have these thoughts and you can't find a way to have someone else listen to you, then what's the point of having these thoughts? And I don't mean that as a way to just stop. Like the logic can tell you to just stop. But that's not living either, right? And so it takes a bravery to keep practicing. It takes a bravery to put yourself out there. It takes a bravery to try and fail and iterate and keep going. But, and I understand those growing pains. I understand how that feels really frustrating to be a type of person who is who was born into this type of brain. But also this type of brain is unique and special in the sense that you get to create these distinctions where other people don't. And a lot of people overconnect, and they have a lot of people in their lives that that's my stomach. They have a lot of people in their lives that they don't have any deep connection with, or they don't talk about their inner world with. They don't have someone that they that they can rely on to tell them the truth of a situation. They can always be wondering that someone's being shady or get involved in drama, right? And so as an INTP, it's important for you to know when you can also get caught in drama, and that if you're not sharing your truth, that can get you caught in drama. And if you're not finding a way to share your truth that also honors feedback, then you might get stuck. And so I'm sharing this because alongside the affirmations video that I just put out, I think this is also important for you to understand how this feeling, how this fear of getting feedback can be very self-limiting. And most of the time, if you give it a try and you keep refining and you keep practicing, you will find more connection on the other side of this. It's just going to take some time. It's going to take some frustration. It's going to be a little bit maddening, but keep practicing. Practice in your mind, practice in person. Deliberately ask for feedback as well. And so when I talked about those affirmations in the last video, I said one of the big validations or affirmations for INTPs is asking if it makes sense. And that doesn't mean getting maybe your entire 2-hour-long thought out and then asking if it makes sense, but break it out in chapters, break it out in sections in a way, and say all right, I'm going to explain this little thing, and does that all make sense? Do I need to reiterate something? Am I going on too long? do you get it? Is this interesting? Right? So those are the things that it's like writing a survey for someone and checking. You're checking in, because otherwise it just becomes a little bit like a limiting form of self-flagellation. And that's not connection. That's just you tying someone to a chair and then telling them all your theories. It's not helpful to anybody. You might as well talk into a recorder. Maybe practice that. Practice giving a talk Think of a topic that you really enjoy, and then give yourself a time limit. My stomach's really acting up. Not fun. Give yourself a time limit. Say like, maybe you're a cryptocurrency person, right? And so how can you explain cryptocurrency in 10 minutes or 5 minutes, right? And so I've talked about this in other videos. Think of it like practicing like a stand-up comedian or a speaker, right? If you've got a few minutes, what's the small version, what's the medium version, and what's the long version of something that you're really interested in? And so it'd be interesting. I would love to see if you give me a 2-paragraph explanation of something that you really care about in the comments below. I would love that. I think that would be really good for you to practice. So that's just kind of a practical thing. But I've got all sorts of other practical examples and applications for how to open up some of that extroverted intuition and subsequently that extroverted feeling in a program on my website at dopamine.school called Cosmic Calibration. And it's all about sort of loosening up, letting go, exploring, expanding possibilities, things like that. And I've got other programs on there as well, but that's the one I would recommend based on this video. And if you resonated with the beginning where I talked about like productive stuff, there's also a INTP productivity workshop, which is a way for you to use your INTP superpowers, your natural skill sets, and be able to adapt them into a framework that allows you to get things out there and get things done. So hopefully it's helped you out. This is a little different of a setup in terms of the mic setup and the camera, but hopefully this makes sense. And if it doesn't, give me feedback. I'm open to it. I always want to learn how I can adapt and make things a little bit better. I can't guarantee that I will take all of that feedback, but I will do the best I can to apply what makes sense to me and keep going forward, right? So I hope that you take an opportunity to share your thoughts with someone in a small, palatable package and get some feedback and then make some adjustments. Keep practicing that, see how that feels for you, and then come back to this video and let me know how your progress is going with that. So with all of that said, I've got all the things at dopamine.school, DOPEAMINE.school, or dopeintp.com. It's the same website, just shorter link. And yeah, that's it for now. Like, subscribe, bell icon, all that fun stuff. Leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself, and yeah, bye.